Content presented in Cheshire Corners is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult a legal professional if you have any questions or concerns about the content of this disclaimer, this series, or the legal implications surrounding psychedelic substances in your jurisdiction.
Being a mycologist is a lot like being a pirate. It's like, oh, there are rules, but they're really more like guidelines.
The code is more what you call guidelines than actual rules.
Nobody just wakes up day one and they're like, oh, I'm the world's greatest grower. We didn't even really know that there were terpenoids or flavonoids in mushrooms until last year. Like, we don't know jack about mushrooms.
I like to help people learn in mycology. You can do as much or as little mycology as you'd like.
I like, ultimately, the point of growing mushrooms is to grow as a person. Whether you realize that or not when you're doing it, everybody I know who's ever tried to grow something, a plant, a mushroom, a person, they grow as a person. Or I can keep spieling about mushrooms because I can talk about them all day.
Welcome to Cheshire Corners. I'm the AI clone of Rita Salyuk, your host, as we trip through the looking glass. Today we're excited to welcome Kyle Obenberger, an award-winning mycologist and geneticist whose work sits at the crossroads of science, mushrooms, and community. Kyle has a rare talent for making complex ideas accessible, grounded, and practical. In this session of Mycology 101, Kyle the Fun Guy will break down the fundamentals of fungi, share real-world tips and tricks from the lab and the field, and highlight how knowledge sharing and collaboration strengthens the mycology community as a whole.
So with me, the idea is you can kind of do as much or as little mycology as you'd like. I got into mycology because I listened to a podcast where Paul Stamets wouldn't shut up about mushrooms. And I was like, wow, this guy really likes mushrooms.
So when it comes to growing your own mushrooms, a lot of people will indicate that this is a difficult activity. It's something that you need to have a lot of equipment, you need to have a lot of experience, knowledge, good genetics. Like, there's lots of perceived prerequisites to growing mushrooms. But really, when you want to grow mushrooms, all you need to do is have a sense of curiosity, a willingness to fail, and some patience, and you can get there.
Yep.
And
It's wild.
I don't know, like anybody can learn how to do it. The barrier for entry for mycology isn't that high, and I think that that's one of the coolest things about the science. We were teaching people that these were plants until 1974. My grandpa still thinks I work with plants.
That's okay. Let them think that.
Yeah, like, you water them and they grow. They're plants. I'm like, okay, Bruce. Mycology is undeniably cool. Nobody wanted to talk to me about my job when I worked with rocks like they do when I work with mycology. But like, we have barely scratched the surface of this field. It is in its infancy. My grandpa got taught that this was a plant in 1974 when he was in school. When you hear about mycology, it's often the first time that you hear about it as a human. Like, I was 28 before I even heard about mycology, and I went to school for science. Like, I went to school to be an observational scientist. I studied geology, and I got out of school, and I was out of school for 6 years before I even heard of mycology. And it's kind of wild that we don't have a lot of resources for this science, and we're just in the infancy of forming a science. We called these things plants until 1972. My grandpa still calls mushrooms plants. Like, it's pretty funny how misunderstood these things are, but they're very easy to cultivate. Like, mycology is in its infancy, and I think that's why it's like so cool and interesting to people. Because like, when I studied rocks, nobody wanted to like talk about rocks. Like, people aren't coming to the park to have a rock block party. I've met so many people in mycology that I wouldn't meet otherwise, just because the only thing we have in common is mycology. Like, I've sat down at a table with like a biker, a preacher, and like an accountant. And it's like, what do we all do? We grow mushrooms. strange,
so true.
but
And I only get the opportunity to do what I'm doing and be up here speaking today because I get to work with a bunch of incredible people who care about this. I wouldn't have this opportunity without other people who care. So big shout out to people like Dave, people like Aaron, people like my homie Sam. Hugest shout out to my wife Kelly. People like Ezra show up and they do the work. And it's hard to do any of this on your own. So that's what I'd like to tell people about mycology is it's hard if you try to do everything by yourself. But if you try to be part of a community and you take advantage of the fact that we are a community and we have resources for people, the second that you hit the water in mycology, you're going to be swimming. There isn't, hey, I need to learn how to swim period, like there was when I first got into mycology. All the resources are there. Now, we have made it very hard on ourselves on the internet to share knowledge about mycology.
I do mycology like all day, every day. And it does not look like that's stopping anytime soon. If anything, I need to get more people to do mycology all day, every day with me. We just need to put the dominoes in order so that we can knock them down. Because like, this is way too fun. And this community is, very wholesome. There are going to be rotten apples that we find in it sometimes. Hell, I can be a rotten apple sometimes. But if you make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're taking care of the mycelium and you're taking care of the community around that, dude, it's pretty hard to like not succeed in this space. Just like put in the work, the effort, and like have the interest level, because all of this stuff is fascinatingly interesting. And we've only been scratching the surface.
I have for somebody who's trying to grow or learn how to grow for the first time, find somebody else who's done it. Like when I was in 10th grade, we took a test in calculus and we were all struggling. And there was a sign on the wall that said, if you can't find out how to do something yourself, find somebody else who knows how to do it and ask them a question. And in the middle of the test, one of the students was like, hey, Miss Bell, can we do that on this test? And it turned into a group test. And that's the way that I look at mycology. Like we're all part of a community. We all have a chance to work together and create something big and special and new that the world hasn't seen before. That's all mycology. But when it comes to growing your own mushrooms, you need three things. You need genetics, you need clean grain spawn, and you need substrate. Those are the only materials you need. A still air box, an FFU, laminar flow hood, all these things help and they increase your likelihood of success. But like in order to get started in mycology, the only things that you need are a few supplies, a little bit of knowledge, and just a willingness to fail. Because like that's the cool thing about mycology is when you fail, you didn't fail. You learned what not to do. Learning what not to do is how you learn to actually grow mushrooms. The more you do things that you're not supposed to do in mycology, the more you learn where you can bend and you can break rules. And then eventually you're going to be confident in operating. Nobody just wakes up day one and they're like, oh, I'm the world's greatest grower. But you can have access to people who are in this room with us, who are some of the best growers of these things on the planet. And like most mushroom people that I've met are incredibly humble. They're incredibly open. There's so many of us doing so many different things. Like you can look at people who specialize on agar work in this room. You can look at people who specialize on making grain, people who source Mimosa hostilis, people who do alkaloid testing, people who do extracts and alkaloid testing. There's consultants for consulting. There's so many resources in this room because mushrooms and growing them isn't the hard part. Sharing them in a way that like everybody gets to benefit from it, that's the hard part with mycology.
The reason why it's so important to me to like get other people inspired in mycology is because I try to do everything in this space and I can't do everything by myself. In order to accomplish things, we need to collaborate with other people to do more than we can as individuals. And like the mycelium already does that itself. Two spores get together, they form a network.
Because at the end of the day, the more people there are that are doing my job, the more access people have to mushrooms. I don't look at other people as competitors in the space or people encroaching on what I do when they want to do the same thing. I see it as, ooh, another potential collaborators. I like one person who I really admire in the space as a scientist and as a human is Ian Bollinger. He works with the Trip Comics crew. He's worked with Oakland Hyphy in the past. Ian has always said, always be training your replacement. And it's something that I truly believe in science and in society, that if you want things to get better, tell everybody what you know. Because somebody else is going to come in with knowledge that you don't have, and you're probably going to learn something from them just as they're learning something from you. Being threatened by knowledge and being threatened by competition, commiseration, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'd rather people see mycology and go, whoa, that looks really hard. And it's like, nope, it's not really hard. I just make it look really hard because I have a tendency to do too much, just like all mushroom people. We're all doing too much. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. But because we're all doing too much, we're very happy to share how and why we end up doing too much. And you can glean information from that. And eventually, after you do that enough times, you're going to be doing too much as well. That's just the nature of mushrooms. Like, they're so good that we want to do too much with them all the time. And then these things help people. This isn't only possible to make medicine. You can grow food, you can grow materials, you can create solutions that solve problems in the future with mycology. And like, all you have to do to get started is ask somebody a question who's excited about mycology. And like, most of us, as long as we're not pulling our hair out because of bills, will take the time to give you the information and try to light that spark that is lit up underneath all of us. Because like, here, just pan around real quick. Like, all of the people here, these are just mushroom people. Like, on a Saturday, in a park, in the rain, we have the whole gazebo full of mushroom people. And like, we probably all wouldn't get together for anything else other than mushrooms. And I think that that is probably the most special thing about mycology, is that it brings people together to myceliate who wouldn't otherwise. And we get to do beautiful things with that mycelial network. We just have to remember, like, gotta take care of ourselves, gotta take care of the mushrooms, and we have to take care of each other. Because like, we are part of a community. And it's easy to get wrapped up in your own thing in this society that we've built. But like, mushrooms are a communal organism. We're a communal organism. The hardest part about growing is probably contamination. Nobody likes to get a contaminated bag, have put, 2, 4, 6 weeks, sometimes 3 months into this process and have no result come out at the end of it. That's why I always think back to Mrs. Bell's calculus class where we all got to cheat on a test together. Use the community. They're here. And that's not to say take advantage of other people's enthusiasm. Find a way to work with somebody else's enthusiasm to have the sum of the parts equal more than the whole. Like, when you find people that you're working together with and you're making more, it's a lot easier for you to push forward and do too much. So when it comes to mycology and like getting started, the best advice I have for anybody is learn about microbiology to the extent of understanding what contamination is and how to avoid it. Learn the definitions of pasteurized versus sterilized and operate with those. Find a homie who has good aseptic technique and copy them, and find what works for your aseptic technique. And like, ultimately, the point of growing mushrooms is to grow as a person. Whether you realize that or not when you're doing it, everybody I know who's ever tried to grow something, a plant, a mushroom, a person, they grow as a person. And like, the cool thing about mushrooms is that as you grow them, you just continue to grow and grow and grow. And like, it's not hard to grow a lot of mushrooms.
The reason I'm as open of a book as I am is when I first started in mycology, people were really helpful to me, and they gave me all the information and resources that I needed to just rock it in the space. And if I can give somebody else a booster pack to start their myco journey, like that's why I love genetics. If you start with fire genetics, you're going to get hooked on the space because you can't not. It's just like, oh, they're doing the work.
Just within one species, we as a community have put so much work into phenotypic differentiation that like we have blobs, we have capital stem motions, we have sclerotia. In the Netherlands, they went so hard on sclerotia producers that they have isolations that don't even make fruiting bodies. And it's all coming down to community and where the community spends their time and energy. So it's a balance managing your community interaction with your individual desires and wants within mycology. So like if you want to go hard on this, it's kind of hard to do that with other people if you're not cognizant of the fact that like we myceliate. All of us myceliate. And like you can't prevent people who are mushroom people from myceliating with other mushroom people. That's never going to work. So mushrooms in general, they're water-loving organisms. So one thing that I like to have people understand is the role of each of the steps in the process. So like we do genetics on agar because agar is something that's really easy to keep sterile and do sterile work on. So we keep our genetics individually as the only thing on that plate. Then when we take those genetics, we can multiply them out. Most people, the first time that they work with mushrooms, it's going to be liquid culture. That liquid culture is going to go into sterile grains. The reason it's important for the grains to be sterile is the same reason it's important for the genetics to be sterile. We want the only organism on that grain to be mushrooms. And when it comes down to growing mushrooms, then we have a substrate. We have a couple of choices for substrate. We can pasteurize it or we can sterilize it. Pasteurization has a shorter shelf life. Sterilization has a longer shelf life. There are benefits and disadvantages to each of these methodologies, but you can use either pasteurized or sterile substrate. Sterile substrate has less likelihood to contaminate on the shelf. Pasteurized substrate has more of a tendency to not contaminate after you inoculate it, but it can contaminate on the shelf. So it's like understanding the dynamics of what you're doing to grow mushrooms is really all you need to do. When you get good genetics, you have clean grain spawn, and you know what you're doing with your substrate, all you need to do is mix those things together, either in a bag or a tub, and wait. If your aseptic technique was good, at the end of the cycle, you get mushrooms. When you're growing all the lion's mane in the world, you get to feed people with that. And feeding people is really cool. But I do know that it's really easy for you and you and you and everybody else in this room here to grow mushrooms. It just feels hard. And I'm here to try to make that not feel hard. Or I can keep spieling about mushrooms because I can talk about them all day. Definition-wise, when you pasteurize something, you heat it until microbial activity is reduced to sufficiently low activity levels for the activity that you're using that product for. So like milk is the one that most of us are familiar with pasteurization. In the United States, we pasteurize milk rather than sterilizing it. When you sterilize milk, it becomes shelf-stable at room temperature. When it's pasteurized, it's not shelf-stable at room temperature. So you have to refrigerate that milk. That creates logistical supply side dynamics. And that's the same thing that we're doing in mycology with pasteurized versus sterilized. With a sterilized block, I can make that and have it sit on the shelf for 2 months if it was made properly, pull it out 2 months later and use it. So like if I have a lot of downtime, but a lot of capacity, if I don't have a lot of downtime, but I have a lot of capacity to make things, I should probably be sterilizing things ahead of time so that I have sterile substrates and a long shelf stability and a lot of flexibility with my operation. But pasteurization takes less thermal energy to be achieved because it's a lower temperature. So if you're looking into costs, you're trying to be efficient with electricity, you're trying to be efficient for the environment, you're trying to grow more with less costs. Pasteurization makes a lot more sense. And then pasteurization also does this thing where it retains certain thermophilic beneficial microbes for things. This is more well understood with plants than it is with fungi because we've studied the nitrogen fixation pathway in plants pretty extensively. We didn't even really know that there were terpenoids or flavonoids in mushrooms until last year. Like, we don't know jack about mushrooms, and that's part of the problem right now. And why like me getting to talk about how to grow mushrooms is more of like a a loose jumble than like, hey, this is exactly how you do it. Because it's not the best way is the only way. It's the way that works for you so that you're getting the result that you need for your life, for your situation. That's the best thing to do in mycology. But then you'll have people like Aaron who just love all the genetics, or you have people like Dave who just want to grow everything and take awesome pictures of it. And it's like, all right, find ways to work with that. And then the sum of the parts can be greater than the whole. And we can do really cool things. And I've been very lucky as a human to get to do really cool things with mycology. And it just kind of comes down to just interacting with your community in a way where you're like, hey, what do we get to do together? Rather than like, how do I get to do this by myself? There's way too much work to be done in mycology for me to get anything done by myself. Like most of the people in this crowd know, they know me. I do too much. Mushroom people do too much. It's probably our biggest problem is that we do too much. But if we do too much together, oh boy, that's a good time. But to more directly answer your question, pasteurized versus sterilized just comes out to a math problem on logistics. And like usually it comes down to a cost saving thing or like a time saving thing. And for me, it comes down to time more than cost. Because like time is the most precious resource in the world to me right now. And pasteurizing substrate takes less time and effort than sterilizing it. I'm also a big fan of thermophilic bacteria, even though I don't understand how they work. I know they do. We get slightly more production out of pasteurized stuff than we do sterilized stuff. But that's not a rule, that's a guideline. Being a mycologist is a lot like being a pirate. It's like, oh, there are rules, but they're really more like guidelines. And sometimes when you break the rules, you find new rules to follow that are actually more efficient. So a lot of the times when people will tell me a rule in mycology, I ask myself why. And if there isn't a well-substantiated reason why not to do something, most of the time it's nonsense and we're just making up nonsense. And that's what I try to do. And something I encourage all of you in this room to do. Say, I don't know more often. When you say, I don't know, you have a jumping off point to do more stuff together and figure things out together. And you never know, you might find a whole industry in a question. Like cordyceps didn't exist as an industry 5 years ago. And now we're predicting they're going to be a $30 billion industry by 2030. That's a lot of zeros, guys. And like mushrooms have so much opportunity to impact our world in a positive way. That's what I want to kind of highlight. Not like how good we are at growing them or how much money we can make off of them or how big we can grow them. That's cool. Like we accidentally grew the world's biggest mushroom this year. But the thing that I really care about, and the thing that's really cool to see is that it's having a positive impact on your community and the people that get to interact with it. Mushrooms are crazy, man. All right, that looks like about all she wrote. And yeah, that's about all she wrote. And we're back on schedule.
What did Anthony say to you?
Oh, I need to get the mic closer to my mouth. People can't hear me. I'm like, all right, well, you'll be able to hear me on the recording later. That's like,
I'm sorry.
that's all I care about.
Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to Cheshire Corners. Tell me what you think in the comments. And as always, don't get psyched out.